This is a story of a man who gets a surprise visit from a figure of his past, unravelling a series of unsettling revelations. Before we proceed, a quick disclaimer. This story contains themes of betrayal, severe mental illness, graphic violence, and self-harm. Reader discretion is advised. It was a long-awaited weekend, a precious moment of respite from the daily grind. As I kicked back in the comfort of my home, the doorbell chimed, jolting me from my leisurely stupor. The lazy afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room, and the scent of fresh-baked cookies wafted from the kitchen. It was a picture-perfect moment, one that seemed too idyllic to be interrupted. I opened the door to a face from my past. Let's call me John, my ex-girlfriend Jane, a spectre from a chapter of my life I'd rather forget. The world outside was painted in warm hues, but her presence sent a chill down my spine, like an unexpected gust of cold wind on a hot summer's day. 10 years had passed since our breakup, a heart-wrenching chapter fueled by my own betrayal. Our history was a roller coaster of emotions, from the dizzying heights of love to the darkest depths of betrayal. Our past was filled with sweet memories, candlelit dinners, walks in the moonlight, and plans of a future together. Yet, I had cheated on her and left her broken. She had sacrificed so much for our relationship, but I had screwed up royally. Worst of all, instead of apologizing, I had chosen to end it and be with my now wife, Sarah. Standing on my doorstep, Jane looked different, a mix of nostalgia and uncertainty in her eyes. She explained that she was in town for work and had learned of my residence from a mutual friend. With hesitation, I invited her inside. My wife, Sarah, was equally shocked by the unexpected visit, but greeted her with a gracious smile. The tension in the room slowly dissipated as Jane engaged in light-hearted conversation. She even joined in the playtime with my 2 young daughters, Emily and Lily, their laughter echoing through the house. As I watched my 2 daughters playing with Jane, a wave of nostalgia swept over me, carrying me down the winding path of memory. Even though she had assured me that she had forgiven me a decade ago, our lives had taken separate trajectories since that fateful day. We had never crossed paths, exchanged words, or even glimpsed each other in passing. I had moved on, creating a new life with Sarah, and I always assumed Jane was doing the same. The situation felt surreal, like a scene from a long-forgotten dream. It was strange that we had never encountered each other in all these years. In fact, if my memory served me correctly, today marked the exact 10-year anniversary of our heart-wrenching breakup. It was an eerie coincidence, as if fate itself had orchestrated this unexpected reunion on the very day our paths had diverged a decade ago. The air in the room seemed to thicken with unspoken emotions, and the weight of the past pressed upon us all, casting a shadow over what should have been a joyous evening. As evening descended, the room was bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, and the savoury aroma of dinner filled the air. We asked Jane to stay for dinner, and she agreed, offering her assistance in the kitchen. It was almost like old times, a strange but oddly comforting reunion. But as the night wore on, just as we were about to raise our glasses in a toast to friendship and second chances, I noticed that we were out of wine. I excused myself and made my way to the garage, where I kept a stash of vintage bottles. As I rummaged through the dusty shelves, my hand found an old, forgotten bottle. The label was faded, and the cork was covered in cobwebs. It was perfect for the occasion, I thought. Little did I know that this bottle would unwittingly play a part in the unfolding horror. I picked up the bottle and began to make my way back to the dining room, the anticipation of sharing this hidden gem with our unexpected guest growing in my chest. Just as I was about to step back into the warmth of the house, my phone rang. Startled, I answered the call without checking the caller ID, not wanting to keep anyone waiting. As I stepped away from the kitchen window, peering inside at the warm scene of laughter and camaraderie, the world around me suddenly shifted. The voice on the other end of the line shattered the tranquility of the evening, piercing through the cheerful ambience with an eerie solemnity. It began, "Hello, am I speaking to John? My name is Julie. I am Jane's mother. I know it's late, but I felt compelled to tell you something." Stunned and rendered almost speechless, all I could manage was a hesitant "yes." Julie continued, her voice trembling with a heaviness that seemed to seep through the phone. "Last week, Jane. Jane committed suicide." Time seemed to freeze, and my body turned rigid as ice. The words hung in the air, heavy and inexplicable. My world, once filled with the echoes of happiness, had been plunged into a chilling darkness, and I was left frozen, unable to comprehend the weight of what I had just heard. I struggled to form coherent words, my mind grappling with the sheer impossibility of what I had just been told. All I could manage was a week, but Julie, Jane's mother, continued speaking, her voice trembling with a mixture of sorrow and regret. Actually, I should have reached out to her sooner, but I never found the courage to do so. She sighed, a heavy weight in her words. As Julie delved into the grim details, I listened in disbelief, my heart heavy with guilt and sorrow. She explained that after Jane and I had parted ways, she had spiraled into a severe depression, a darkness that seemed to consume her from within. Her condition deteriorated to such an extent that she had to be admitted to a psychiatric hospital. The situation had taken a terrifying turn when Jane began exhibiting signs of a split personality, her psyche fragmenting into something unrecognizable. It was a descent into madness that defied explanation, and despite the best efforts of medical professionals over the course of a decade, nothing had seemed to alleviate her suffering. Julie's voice quivered as she spoke, conveying the years of pain and helplessness that had marked their lives. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the Jane I had known, the one who stood before me, with this disturbing revelation. The air grew thick with an unsettling mix of emotions, and I couldn't help but wonder if the reunion I had thought was a chance occurrence had a darker, more sinister purpose. Julie's voice continued, trembling with the horror of the events she was recounting. Last week, by some twisted means, she managed to convince a nurse to release her from her restraints. She had concealed a knife in her pocket, and the moment she was free, she unleashed unimaginable violence, her desperation and madness driving her to commit unspeakable acts. She slit the throat of one of the nurses and made a desperate attempt to escape. The chilling picture she painted continued to unfold as she recounted how Jane had been trapped in a locked corridor, pursued by more nurses and her doctor. Against all odds, Jane had exhibited a terrifying strength, overpowering everyone who tried to restrain her. In a matter of minutes, she had gone from being a vulnerable patient to the one standing, her body covered in blood, in a scene that defied all reason. Julie's voice grew heavier, her words catching in her throat as she described the gruesome conclusion. In her desperate attempt to escape Jane, she took her own life. When additional security personnel arrived at the room, all they could witness was a nightmarish tableau. Jane's lifeless body lay on the ground, surrounded by an indescribable scene of violence, and two haunting words were carved into the wall with her own blood: Emily and Lily. My mind reeled at the utter horror of the situation. The names of my two daughters, Emily and Lily, carved with blood on the wall, sent shivers down my spine. The room felt like it had plunged into an abyss of darkness and despair, and I couldn't help but question the uncanny connection between the events of that night and the presence of my ex-girlfriend, Jane, in my home. As I stood there, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief, I gazed upon the scene in the dining room. Jane sat with my family, her laughter filling the room as if the grim conversation had never occurred. It was surreal, almost as if the events of that phone call were nothing more than a chilling nightmare. I couldn't find my voice, the weight of what I had just learned bearing down on me like a crushing weight. Slowly, I walked toward the dining table and took my seat, my thoughts a chaotic jumble. Sarah, my wife, noticed my demeanor and asked, "Who was on the phone, John?" I could only manage one word, my voice barely a whisper: Julie. At the sound of that name, Jane, who had been enjoying her meal, suddenly stopped, her gaze fixing on me with an unnerving intensity. A slow, enigmatic smile played on her lips, a smile that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a smile that held secrets and darkness. Thank you for listening to the story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and hit that bell icon.